potential and creates jobs. We have seen gross fixed capital formation contract on average by 4.4% annually between 2016 and 2020, from a peak of 796 billion in 2025. The contraction has been broad-based. Private sector investment, which accounts for nearly 2/3 of total fixed investment, as well as the public sector, have both declined. We seek to reverse these trends by tackling impediments to investment. In the private sector, policy uncertainty, constraints to the ease of doing business, along with the high cost of doing business, are often cited as key constraints to investment. Our clear and stable macroeconomic progress on structural transformation, supporting enabling growth, will go a long way to removing impediments to investment. They will also boost confidence and create an enabling environment for the private sector to invest. With respect to public sector investment, state-owned enterprises have an important role to play in the provision of critical economic goods and services in the economy. Addressing this supply constraint, particularly in the energy and transport sectors, is critical to support higher and sustainable economic growth. On general government, we are increasing on-budget infrastructure allocations to remedy the erosions of baselines. Over the medium term, government consolidated spending on building new and rehabilitating existing infrastructure will increase from 66.7 billion in 2022-23 to 112.5 billion in 2025-26. This includes roads, bridges, stormwater system, and public buildings. This makes spending on capital assets by the fastest growing item by economic classification. By delivering on public sector investment, we'll crowd in private sector investment, improve public service provision, and address backlogs, thus ignite a vicious cycle of high investment, growth, and employment potential. We are also committed to improving state capacity, project planning, preparation, procurement practices, and contract management. This will address the underspending of allocated infrastructure budgets, improve value for money and efficacy of our investment. Madam Speaker, climate change is reshaping the world around us, including our economic context. It poses physical risk to our people, infrastructure, the environment, and production of, including the critical goods such as food. The global response to climate must be coordinated. For our part, we are finalizing negotiations on the pledges by the International Partner Group for the Just Energy Transition. In addition, the investment plan supporting our energy transition was recently endorsed by Cabinet. We will take all necessary steps to ensure that our transition is just. Madam Speaker, when government finances are saddled with debt, it becomes very difficult to meet our developmental objectives. For nearly 15 years, the South African government has been tabling higher deficits. As a result, government debt is projected to be more than 4.7 trillion in our current financial year, compared to 627 billion in the year 2008-2009. This debt is incurring debt service cost that will average 354 billion per year over the medium-term expenditure framework. As already outlined, the global economy is slowing, inflation is increasing, financial markets are becoming more volatile. The result is that the debt service costs are estimated to be 5.9 billion higher in 2022-23 than it was thought at the time of the February budget. Moreover, the possibility of a major price correction in financial markets is a significant risk. This will affect fiscal revenues going forward. It is for this reason that the medium-term strategy needs to maintain a prudent approach to fiscal policy. We need to decrease our debt burden and debt service costs by reducing our annual deficit. This will stabilize public finances and reduce the fiscal risk. Honourable members, we are making progress in this regard. A consolidated fiscal deficit of 4.9% of GDP is projected in 2022-2023. This will decline to 3.2% of GDP by 2025-2026. A primary fiscal surplus of 0.7% of GDP will be achieved in 23-24. This is 1 year earlier than projected at the 2021 medium-term budget policy statement. We also now expect gross government debt to stabilize at 71.4% of GDP in 2022-23, 2 years earlier and at a lower level than projected in the 2022 budget review. Among other things, this means that we are proposing that no budget reduction are implemented in the 2023 budget. In fact, consolidated government spending will exceed 2.2 trillion this year and will rise to 2.5 trillion in 25-26. Turning to revenue, since the 2022 budget, revenue collection has exceeded projections, and the gross tax revenue estimate for 2022-23 has been revised up by 83.5 billion to 1.68 trillion. The higher estimate is largely due to improvements in corporate income tax collections with strong receipts from the finance and manufacturing sectors. This is better than expected revenue collection estimates, including over the medium term, have allowed government to narrow the deficit and mitigate lingering and new risk. Equally, it allows us to gradually restore the baseline budgets of departments key to the delivery of services without making unaffordable permanent commitments. A portion of higher than anticipated revenue will be utilized as follows. First, reduce the deficit in the current financial year and over the MTF, make additions for infrastructure projects, critical public services such as education, health, and policing, addressing fiscal risks that were previously identified in February. These include higher than projected debt service costs, the public service wage bill, and the materialization of financial risk from some state-owned companies. Should any of the fiscal risks materialize, this could negatively affect the fiscal position and government's efforts to stabilize the public finances. Madam Speaker, we are allocating a net addition of 13 billion in spending adjustment for this 2022-23 financial year in the adjustment appropriation bill. The largest adjustment of that 13 billion is 6.3 billion, which is equal to 49% of the total, is allocated towards this disaster relief, especially the April flooding in several parts of the country. Other adjustment in the adjustment appropriation include 308 million for 24 rural bridges through a program called Willisizo Rural Bridges. I must explain, this amount is only for in-year. For the next outer years, we're penciling in for all provinces. This will cover only 2 provinces which are ready with their bridges, that is Eastern Cape and Limpopo. 500 million rand is also set aside to kick off the Home Affairs digitization program that will employ 10,000 young people over 3 years. 118 million is to deal with an interim allocation cost to prepare for the rebuilding of Parliament. I think I need to explain that because there are 2 amounts included in that. The first amount relates to how much Parliament is, I'm going to make the figure at the end, how much it will cost Parliament to rebuild it. And then how much between now and March can be allocated towards rebuilding Parliament. That amount is penciled in. The second amount in that 118 is an amount that says, in between, as a result of the fire, Parliament has had incurred additional costs it had not factored in, including offices, including this address today was not budgeted to be outside. It was budgeted to be in Parliament, not to be here. So Parliament is paying extra cost by being here. So you've got two amounts to get the technical work for the rebuilding. Secondly, for what is called unavoidable and unforeseen for Parliament. Honourable members, during the current financial year, wage negotiations have been taking place at the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council. On the 30th of August, 2022, government made a final offer which emanated from a facilitated process. Underline that. From a facilitated process, and a tentative agreement was reached and was tabled before the Bargaining Council. All parties undertook to go and seek mandates. Then the unions came back and said they do not have a mandate. But it must be understood that there was a tentative agreement facilitated. This offer includes the continuation of non-pensionable cash allowance for the current financial. This translates into an average of 1,000 rand per employee per month until March 2023. It also translates that cash control into 4.5% for the wage bill, and another pensionable salary increase of 3% for public servants. That together in total comes to 27.5%. Sibazamile. Madam Speaker, the offer on the table is the best interest of the fiscals and public service workers. Implementing it does not undermine the collective bargaining process. We believe that the facilitation process has helped all parties get to this point. Therefore, the spending estimates we are tabling today include this amount. This offer will be implemented through the payroll system and backdated to April 2022. Honourable members, our budget over the next 3 years is focused on restoring service delivery and laying the foundations for a higher growth. Medium changes to spending plans are driven mainly by government's decision to extend the special COVID-19 social relief distress grant by 1 year until 31 March 2024. The fiscal framework also includes funding for cadetry costs of the 2022-2023 public service increases, as well as for safety and security, infrastructure investment, and service delivery. The SRD grant was introduced in May 2022 as a temporary measure to respond to the needs of the most vulnerable who were affected by lockdown measures. It has been extended several times since then. Discussions on the future of the grant are ongoing and involve very difficult trade-offs and financing decisions. Despite the provision made in this budget, I want to reiterate that any permanent extension or replacement will require permanent increases in revenues, reduction in spending elsewhere, or a combination of both. Madam Speaker, this is what is meant by trade-offs, balancing the need to address one priority over another. Overall, consolidated government spending is projected to increase to 2.21 trillion in 2023, 2.48 in 25-26, at an average growth of 4%. The social wage totaling 3.56 trillion over the next 3 years, or put differently, 59.2% of the consolidated non-interest spending. will take up the biggest share of the budget in support of poor households and the most vulnerable in our society. The largest allocations are directed to the education, health, and social development sectors. Moreover, over the next 3 years, spending increases will be prioritized to improve investment in infrastructure and boost the budget for safety, security, and fighting corruption. Overall, government's consolidated capital spending will increase from 95.1 billion in 22-23 to 145 billion in 25-26. This excludes spending on state-owned enterprises. We are working closely with the presiding officers of Parliament to restore and rebuild Parliament. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, we have made allowances for approximately 2 billion for rebuilding of Parliament. Madam Speaker, over the next years, we will work with provinces and municipalities to make meaningful progress in achieving our developmental goals. Municipalities shape the living conditions of our people. They ensure that people have access to cleaning, drinking water, energy, housing, and sanitation. Yet several municipalities are dysfunctional, experiencing either financial or leadership crisis, reflected in a general inability to deliver services. Following a diagnostic review of the local government capacity building system, the National Treasury is coordinating with key stakeholders, including the Department of Cooperative Governance, SALGA, and provinces in the design of capacity building systems towards a more integrated and outcome-focused approach. Over the next 3 years, we propose allocation of 48.4% of available non-interest spending to national departments, 41.4% to provinces, and 10.1% to local government. This will allow provinces to support basic education and health services, roads, housing, social development, and agriculture. We're also allocating additional funds to local government to support the delivery of free basic services to poor households. Considering the rise of cost of the free basic service, as well as the rising bulk electricity and water costs, the 2023 budget review will provide more detail on these efforts. Madam Speaker, some of the state-owned companies represent critical components of our economic activity, especially in transport, engineering, and energy. These companies should be self-sufficient and must contribute to economic growth. Unfortunately, we face a situation where financial weaknesses caused in previous years by bad leadership and corruption still needs to be resolved. Moreover, when unavoidable events such as the recent floods destroy infrastructure and assets, it puts the whole economy at risk. In the meantime, the road network must function, ports must operate, and critical technical projects cannot be halted. So, as balance sheets are being restored, and those who looted and mismanaged them are being held accountable, including through the criminal justice system, we have little choice but to act to keep these key services running. We are proposing to use higher than anticipated revenues in the current year to reduce risk from specific SOEs. These resources cannot be used to fund baseline increases as they are once off. Using them in this way will also not expand the fiscal deficit compared to our existing medium-term plans. The financial support to SOEs recognizes their potential to contribute to our long-term growth prospects. We are thus tabling a special appropriation bill to provide additional funding to Denel, Transnet, and Sandra. These allocations will allow these entities to adjust their business models and restore their long-term financial viability. Fiscal support to state-owned companies remains a challenging balancing act given the many competing priorities and limited resources. Funding to SOEs will now come with strict pre- and post-conditions. Pre-conditions mean that SOE will need to comply with these conditions before they receive government support, and not after. Non-compliance to conditions means no funding. Transnet is allocated 2.9 billion to ensure the return of out-of-service locomotives. This will be complemented by 2.9 billion from in-year spending adjustment to deal with flood damage that affected its operations in eThekwini. Denel is allocated 3.4 billion to support recent progress made to stabilize the entity. This allocation will be augmented by 1.8 billion in sale of non-core assets and will unlock committed order book of 12 billion awaiting execution. Honourable members, the uncertainty surrounding the Gauteng improvement project continues to have a major negative implication for road construction in the country. We need to move on from the debates of previous years and find solution to this challenge. To resolve this funding impasse, the Gauteng provincial government has agreed to contribute 30% to settling Sanral's debt and interest obligations, while national government covers 70% of this. Gauteng will also cover the cost of maintaining 201 kilometers and associated with the 201 kilometers and associated interchanges of the roads, and any additional investment in road will be funded through their existing electronic toll infrastructure or new toll plaza or any other revenue source which within their area of responsibility. Let me just explain this because it became, okay, before that, let me do this. Government proposes to make an initial allocation of 23.7 billion from the national fiscus, which will be dispersed on strict conditions. Let me then explain, because there was something which, when I addressed the media, let me explain this thing. For 7 years, we've been battling with e-toll in Gauteng. And for all the political wrangling, it has had an impact on the balance sheet of Sanral. What is the implication? Now, Sanral is due to, can default any time. So we've agreed with Gauteng. Gauteng, take your toll, your roads. We will take the debt, a better portion of it, but you will contribute 30% of it. From then, Tina as national singaphandle ngebail uzihambela wedwa mntaseka. Moving forward, if you decide to maintain the roads, you as Gauteng, you can either toll to get the maintenance, or you can, from your end revenue, do something about that. So, save value e-toll from today in that sense. There are implications. There are implications. What are those implications? Gauteng is still yet going to do phase 2 of this project. It's going to be important that in doing phase 2, proper planning and thinking on how to fund phase 2 must take place. That's one of the implications we must have. It also has got implication on the user pay principle. Turning to Eskom, for at least a decade, we spent billions of rands supporting Eskom with limited improvements in the reliability of the electricity supply or the financial health of the company. To ensure Eskom's long-term financial viability, government will take over a significant portion of the utility's 400 billion debt. While the selection of the relevant debt instruments and the method of effecting the relief is still to be determined, The quantum is expected to be between 1/3 and 2/3 of Eskom's debt. The debt takeover, once finalized, together with other reforms, will ensure that Eskom is financially sustainable. This program will allow Eskom to focus on planned performance and capital investment and ensure that it no longer relies on permanent bailouts. Importantly, the program will include strict conditions required of Eskom and other stakeholders before and during the debt transfer. These conditions will address Eskom's structural challenges by managing the cost addressing the municipal and household debt due to the utility, and providing clear clarity on transparency and in tariff pricing. In addition, the conditions will be informed by Treasury-led independent review of Eskom operations, in particular, the performance of its fleet. In other words, if I want to explain this thing, for us to be able to say to Eskom, these are the outcomes we require as we change debt, we need from ourselves to be informed. In that regard, we have said we want an independent review of people who are going to assist us to analyze what is happening in Eskom, so that we should be able to attach conditions which are appropriate. Further details of this program will be finalized following consultation with all relevant stakeholders and lenders, and will be announced in the 2023 budget. Madam Speaker, I must say, we made a commitment in the budget that we'll provide more detail, including the quantum on this Eskom. However, dealing with financial individuals is quite a complicated issue, President. Lenders are quite a difficult crowd to deal with. In the process of doing all of these things, trying to find out what the quantum should be, we've got to negotiate with the lenders. There are legal implications and so on and so on. But we're still committed to make our decision within the financial year, because in February we said within the financial year. We didn't say by the medium term. So we'll still make that commitment by the financial year in terms of even the quantum. We are also adopting best practices in the procurement of goods and services, including the highest standard of transparency in the tendering process. Such modernization aims to simplify and speed up the process of public infrastructure projects while reducing the scope of looting and corruption. Here, the issue is, Dr. Ramkopa tells us that the underspending on infrastructure per annum is 43 billion rand. And largely of that relates to skills issue, corruption, regulatory framework which is problematic. Tight regulatory framework. I was addressing a meeting somewhere, somebody raised their hand and said, when are you going to stop Regulation 16, which is frustrating triple Ps? I didn't know about Regulation 16. I went back to the office to check what Regulation 16 does. It turns out it also makes people to triple Ps to take over a three-year period. So those minor things need to be removed from the system in order to make sure that procurement can be effective. We expect to introduce the public procurement bill, which will enhance transparency, integrity, and promoting the use of technology for efficiency and effectiveness in the public procurement to Parliament by March 2023. Honorable Maswangai will bear with us. The government, in South Africa, there's a democratic process. The consultation process is beyond us. Just NEDLEC alone, I don't know how many months it took us in NEDLEC, but we're still committed to do it within this fiscal year. The new preferential procurement regulations of 2022, replacing the now invalid regulations of 2017, will be promulgated in November 2022 to be effective from the 16th of January 2023. The regulations empower organs of the state with the authority to determine their own preferential procurement policies within the ambit of the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. I must add, yes, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa says it is the organ of state that procures. It's the organ, every organ of state must have its own procurement policy, not be getting permission now and again from Treasury. So we're giving you that authority, each organ of the state to be able to have its own procurement policies. No one will then say, if I don't deliver on time on my project, I'm delayed by Treasury. Madam Speaker, earlier this week, President Ramaphosa announced government's response to the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. It committed government to a new chapter in our struggle against corruption, to advance the renewal of our society. It noted the need for the state to be ethical and free of corruption as it serves the needs and interests of the people. As noted by the Commission, to enable service delivery, we should protect honest accounting officers and authorities who make decisions in good faith from criminal prosecution and civil litigation. In this regard, we'll strengthen the auditing and preventive control of systems to enable managers to manage while putting mechanisms to hold them accountable. The Commission of Inquiry into the State Capture made a recommendation aimed at strengthening institutional governance and accountability mechanism. As has been done with Bain, we'll continue to take punitive administrative action against companies and individuals who have actively facilitated corruption and irregular activities. Madam Speaker, crime is a safe economic as well as a social issue. A safe environment is important for full participation in economic and social life. This makes fighting crime a key pillar of enhancing economic growth. Many South Africans' lives live in fear in their homes, in their places of work, and in places of recreation. In response, we are allocating additional resources to our security forces to take the fight to those that threaten peace, our peace as a nation. We'll support the police to recruit an additional 15,000 constables over the next 3 years. This is in addition to the current 10,000 they are recruiting this year. Honourable members, we are doing everything necessary to prevent grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force, the international standard-setting body that oversees global compliance with anti-money laundering rules. Already we've tabled 2 bills in Parliament aimed at addressing weaknesses in our legislative framework. The bills are expected to be enacted by the end of this year. This will be a significant step towards meeting the 40 recommendations made by the Financial Action Task Force. We are also required to implement laws on anti-money laundering and corruption more effectively. Investing in building the capacity of our regulatory and enforcement institution is already bearing positive results. These include the Investigating Directorate of the National Prosecuting Authority has enrolled 26 cases, declared 89 investigations, and 165 accused persons have appeared in court for alleged state capture-related offenses. The Asset Forfeiture Unit has frozen or granted preservation orders to the value of 12.9 billion rand and returned a total of 2.9 billion to the affected entities. The SIU has instituted 4 High Court cases in relation to contracts worth 62.1 billion. And SARS investigations arising from the Commission's findings and evidence have resulted in collection of 4.8 billion in unpaid taxes. SARS is currently engaged in 18 projects involving 222 cases. 11 of those cases are recommendations explicitly for SARS to execute, and 8 have been finalized and others are under investigation. The 2022 medium-term budget policy statement proposes additional resources to the budgets of the National Prosecuting Authority, the Special Investigation Unit, the Financial Intelligence Center, and the South African Revenue Services to further improve the capability of the state to investigate and prosecute sophisticated financial crimes. In addition, government will also publish a revised national risk assessment strategy on anti-money laundering and terror financing. Madam Speaker, let me conclude by reiterating what I said in the beginning of our democratic ideas. Will be given life and sustained by growing and inclusive economy. We cannot ignore the relation between democracy and the economy, and the relation between politics and inequality. We are fortunate to have a legal and policy framework backed by political vision that allows us to transform the economic conditions of our people and deliver on the promise of democracy. The medium-term budget policy statement reminds us of the urgent need to pursue the reform of our economy in our consistent manner and with the freedom of our people in mind. We should not take lightly the link that former President Nelson Mandela made and other leaders that drew between thriving economy and a fair and just society. This is the golden thread that this runs through our constitution. And in this medium-term budget policy statement, we should keep sight of this goal and the balancing act it entails as we do our work. Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to President Ramaphosa and Deputy President Mabuza for their support and leadership. And thank you to Deputy Minister of Finance and the National Treasury team, led by the Acting Director General. My sincere thanks to the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service and the Governor of South African Reserve Bank. Of course, Nonkoskazi noba akekho apha undijongile TV. Let me also thank my colleagues in the Ministers' Committee on the Budget and the Budget Council who have shared the load of tough decisions that have to be made. Similarly, the Parliamentary Committee of Finance and Appropriations. I express my sincere appreciation. Lastly, thank you to each and every South African, including you. I serve at your privilege. I thank you.
I thank the Honorable the Minister. Honorable members, thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, thank you. Honorable members, members should at all times uphold the dignity and decorum of the House. Ours is a chamber of debate and not a forum for protest. It is here that we engage one another verbally with due regard and respect. While Rule 64E provides that members may not, amongst others, bring weapons to any kind of dangerous or threatening articles, it is silent on the holding of placards in the chamber. This is a matter that is currently under consideration by the subcommittee on the review of rules. And I will ensure that the matter is brought to the Rules Committee at the earliest convenience. However, what is not in doubt is that you cannot use placards to insult one another. Our rules also apply to members, ministers, deputy ministers, even those who may not be members of Parliament. Order. The following members held up placards that are in breach of Rule 84 and 85. Honorable Mautwe, you've accused the minister of being a pervert. Honorable Chabangu and Honorable Makaula, you have accused the minister of being a sexual delinquent. Honorable Noluchungu, you've accused the minister of covering up for GPV. Honorable Ntlangwini and Honorable Hlonyana, you've accused. No, because I'm still on the floor and I'm ruling on a matter. I am ruling on a matter. Please take the floor, Honorable Shivambu. Now, Honorable Ntlangwini and Honorable Hlonyana, you've accused the minister of bribing his way. Now, Rule 84, honorable members. But I'm ruling on a point of order. I am on a point of order. Take your seat, Honorable Shivambu, please. Honorable Shivambu, please take your seat. Take your seat, Honorable Shivambu. Honorable Tlakute.
Thank you, Honorable.
This is the thing.
Thank you. Am I?
Okay, take your seat, honorable member. Honorable members, I'm sure you are all aware that when the presiding officer is ruling on a matter, before the presiding officers has completed that process, you may not raise a point of order. You have noted that throughout the session, I actually restrained myself and made sure that I do not continue to engage those who have placards in this House. I was now ruling. It is for that reason, Honorable Shivambu, that I did not grant you the opportunity. Honorable Shivambu, we will not have a circus here now. What we will have is you will allow us to, Mautwe, honorable member, just behave like an honorable member. You behave like an honorable member. Now, honorable members, Rule 84, as I was saying, provides that no member may use offensive, abusive, insulting, disrespectful, unbecoming, unparliamentary words or language, nor offensive, unbecoming, or threatening gestures. Rule 85(2) provides that a member who wishes to bring any improper or unethical conduct on the part of another member may do so in the form of a separate substantive motion. The members, therefore, I have cited, I order you, honorable members, to lower your placards. I also will refer this behavior to the Rules Committee. Rule 64, honorable members, provides that members are required not to take photographs or video footage during proceedings. Honorable Tambo, you acted in breach of this rule. I order you to delete the photograph or video. I bring your attention also to Section 21 of the Powers and Privileges Act, which prohibits broadcasting or transmission by electronic means of proceedings of the House without the authority of the House. Should this not be done, you may be in breach of the Powers and Privileges Act. Honorable members, as you have not, those of you I have directed to withdraw the placards, you have not done so. I will now rule on this matter and propose a way forward at the next sitting of the House. The papers that have been delivered to us by the Minister will be referred to the relevant committees. Honorable members, order. That now concludes the business of the House, and the House is adjourned.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
Members, the Villiers, how are you?
Comrade Nas, I'm in.
Functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Welcome back. The minister has presented his speech. Everything went well. Everything is okay. And now, because we've got about 13 political parties in parliament, I am in one of the leaders from those parties, and this is Honorable Sheikh from the NFP. Honorable Sheikh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
And then your reaction to the minister's speech?
Well, let me welcome the presentation by the minister. But let me start off by saying I welcome the fact that the minister recognizes some of the challenges that we have and that needs immediate intervention. One of it, of course, is local government level, and is making more resources available to local government, but recognizes that we have a capacity problem in local government, and he wants to deal with that. Very importantly, the minister raises the concern about the high levels of debt, which is going to go up to 4.7 trillion. And he says that with the windfall that we've had, particularly from corporate tax, they are going to be dealing with the issue of trying to reduce the debt in the country, which will bring down the debt service cost, which is now in the medium term expected to be about 358 billion rand a year. He's putting more money into infrastructure, yes, but he does realize that we have serious challenges as far as the implementation of infrastructure projects. So there's no point in putting money somewhere and you don't have the capacity to implement. If you remember, in the last financial year, we've had underspending in infrastructure development. We welcome the allocation for disaster management, but again we want to raise a concern, and if you look at particularly KZM, it is not necessarily the floods or the disaster that brought us to where we are, but is the lack of maintenance over a period of time. So a lot of this money is going to go up there to put in new infrastructure, because the infrastructure that we have currently, you are not in a position to be able to rehabilitate that infrastructure.
And talking about as a member of parliament, do you also think that parliament is doing, good as far as oversight in terms of how the budget is spent around the country, and what can be the best measures for that?
Clearly not. And I've raised this time and time again, the oversight mechanisms that we have in parliament and the huge amount of money that is spent locally and out of the country when we go into SADC and many of these other institutions, we're not getting value for money. The oversight mechanisms, you go out, you identify challenges and problem areas, you come back, you debate it, you adopt the report, and then what happens? It's thrown in a bin. There's very little or nothing that happens. Or portfolio committees who have a responsibility to conduct oversight and hold the executive to account, do not have a mandate to take it any further than come to Parliament, debate the report, adopt the report, and that's where it ends. The Auditor General, has been from time to time, and every year, in fact this year, the audit report says a hell of a lot of the state of governance in all spheres of government, particularly the local municipality. And one of the things that we lack is consequence management. And if you saw the Auditor General report, again, highlighted the problems you got as far as management and skills. In other words, what we are saying is that while you've got the necessary qualification, you do not have the skills and the capacity to be able to deliver, and that's one of the major problems.
Thank you so much, Honorable Sheikh. But lastly, I just want to ask you, do you also think that the minister generally, this Mtbps, if spent well and implemented well, can make a difference as far as our economy and the lives, the development of the lives of South Africans?
Well, yes, a lot of what we've heard today is what we've heard in the previous medium-term budget policy statement. And it's worth nothing unless you're able to implement it. But remember, it's not only the minister on his own that can do this. If you're talking about, the state of the country, particularly if you look at the high levels of crime that he's talking about, it is not the minister of finance whose responsibility, but you need social development, you need basic education, you need the law enforcement for them all to come together to be able to deal with the root causes of the high levels of crime, including the high unemployment rate in the country. If unemployment continues in the country, the crime rate must increase. So yes, you need a holistic approach to these things.
Thank you so much, Honorable Sheikh. That was Honorable Sheikh. I am waiting for Honorable Madisa from from COPE to also get his reaction from as to what the minister's promises are for his party and what he would love to get to be done in terms of this budget as far as making the lives of South Africans better. Welcome, sir.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, welcome to Parliament TV. Your reaction, please, as to the minister's speech today.
I must say that it's extremely unfortunate. I had thought that the minister would come and address the problems that we have there, that we know. But instead what he did was to repeat what we already know. For example, we had thought that he would say, yes, we owe 5 trillion rand, and this is how we're going to deal with it as a government. He has not done that. He has said we owe that. We had thought that he would say, insofar as the issue of 400 billion rand that must be paid to deal with the issue of electricity, Eskom will be able to deal with that. But he only repeated that and said, we, as time goes on, will be able to deal with that. Which then says, in my own opinion, actually is a fact, that will take the entire year to try and look into that. And for as long as we have that kind of a problem, it means the companies are closing, people are losing their jobs, etc., etc. The Reserve Bank, for example, has spoken about the increase in, increases, and the prime rate and GDP and so on. Even the Land Bank has said that, but he has not addressed those things. Now we are actually having very serious problems. I therefore am saying that instead of one rising to say that the minister has succeeded, I don't think that is the case. The alternative is truly the case.
And then are you saying generally this speech of the minister would not take the country forward one way or the other?
No, not at all. I mean, he has not come up with a proper way forward. I mean, if you talk about, for example, 70% of the young people not working, and you are unable to solve that thing of the electricity, we can go on in any way. So it does not help in addressing the issue of unemployment, the issues of poverty, etc. He hasn't done that. He has only repeated that which we know, permeates our country at the moment. Therefore, I don't think we've achieved anything at all.
Thank you so much,
You're
sir,
welcome. Thank you.
for coming,
Thank
talking
you.
to Parliament TV.
Thank you.
And we are waiting for Honorable Member from the Good Party to give us also his reaction. I did say to you that we have got about 13 parties in Parliament. Welcome, sir.
Welcome, thank you.
Yes, your reaction to the Minister's Mtbps presentation.
Well, we welcome the fact that the Social Relief of Distress grant has been extended. There simply was no way that you could withdraw that grant at the end of March next year. In fact, it can never be withdrawn. So saying it's a temporary grant and extended for one more year is something that we don't accept. It has to ultimately be the basis of a basic income grant, because there are already about 8 million families who rely on it for some relief to their poverty. We welcome the commitment to the green energy transition, and we accept that there has to be some taking on of the Eskom's debt in order to achieve both a stable electricity supply in the short term and a transition to green and renewable energy into the future. We're very happy that there's going to be extra resources available to the criminal justice system, in particular if we're going to see prosecutions that arise out of the State Capture Commission. Those prosecutions and those investigations would never occur or are going to take too long to occur without resources. So we welcome the resources that would be allocated to support them and the resources that would be allocated to support policing. So overall there was some good stuff in there. The fact that the Minister is committing to improving free basic services and the allocations to municipalities to provide free basic services to poor households in the next financial year is also welcome. But obviously the devil is in the detail, and we'll have to see how that's going to be implemented and how he will make sure that those households do actually receive those benefits.
As an honourable member in Parliament, do you also think that Parliament in its oversight role as a mandate of Parliament is doing well in terms of making sure that the budget is being spent accordingly and adequately?
I think that we can do with a lot more oversight and a lot more intervention by Parliament in the budget process. The previous Minister of Finance committed to a zero-based budgeting approach, but that has never been implemented. And if it is to be implemented successfully, will require each of the portfolio committees to deep dive into their budgets and to find the wastage and to check the benefit that is being derived from historical allocations in budgets that may no longer be relevant. So zero budgeting is really a hard task that parliamentarians should be doing in their portfolio committees so that we can get to a baseline from which we can say, now these are our priorities and this is how we should budget going forward. So no, I don't think there's enough oversight because I don't think there's enough deep dive.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for talking.